The fading crimson glow of the dying sun stretches alien shadows across the derelict spaceport as Captain Vance's boots pound against cracked tarmac. His comm unit erupts with static and the engineers scream, cutting through. They moved up the timetable final boarding call in 15 minutes. A gasp of hydraulic pistons echoes through the empty bays as ahead, the last starship's engines whine to life. Vance vaults over a collapsed cargo loader, watching in horror as the boarding ramp begins ascending. Somewhere in that steel belly, the last data core of human civilization waits, and its sole guardian is still 20 meters away with the security drones closing in. The ship's thrusters ignite with a deafening roar as the countdown numbers blink red across the gantry, single digits now. Every muscle burns as he makes one final desperate leap. The impact of his body against the metal ramp sends shockwaves through Vance's ribs as the hydraulics shudder and lock into place. The guard's fingers hover over triggers, their expressions flickering between duty and doubt. Rail's eyes dart to the chip in Vance's bleeding hand, then back to the view screen where the spaceport fractures under artillery fire. You expect me to believe a rogue captain over Central Command. Rail barks, but the tremor in his voice betrays him. The ship groans as thrusters push them toward the stratosphere, artificial gravity straining against the chaos. Vance staggers forward, shoving the chip into a console. A holographic warning erupts, coordinates recalculating in real time, the projected course spiraling into oblivion. The navigation logs are doctored. Vance pants. They were never planning to let us reach New Terra. The guards exchange glances as alarms blare through the ship. Somewhere below decks, a fuel line ruptures with a deafening hiss. Rail's jaw tightens, but his rifle lowers an inch. If you're lying, he growls, I'll space you myself. Overhead, the intercom crackles, the pilot's voice frantic. Brace for emergency maneuvers, something's pulling us off trajectory. The floor lurches as the stars outside stretch into streaks of light, the ship yanked sideways into the void. The ship's gravity fails with a sickening lurch, sending crew and debris spiraling into chaos. Metal crunches as a loose cargo crate slams into Rail's loyalists, their tethers snapping like ribbons in the sudden zero-G. Vance kicks off a bulkhead, grabbing a drifting stun baton just as a security officer fires the shot sizzling past his shoulder. Behind the fray, Kira's fingers blur across the nav console, sparks showering her face as she overrides lockouts. They rigged the whole system, her voice cracks with panic. It's counting down to an uncharted jump point straight into a gravitational shear. Across the deck, a medic wrestles with a floating first aid kit, blood droplets forming crimson spheres in the air. Vance somersaults over a group of struggling crewmen, his boot connecting with a rifle before it discharges into the ceiling. The intercom screeches feedback as he grabs it mid-spin. They lied about the colony coordinates. The words ripple through the ship like an electric shock. A mechanic lets go of his opponent mid-punch, eyes widening at the main display, the navigation graph now visible to all, its trajectory line spearing through a known pulsar field. Someone vomits in zero-G. Rail snarls, bracing against a conduit, his sidearm wavering between Vance and the mutineers. Then the ship shudders violently, artificial gravity rebooting at 30%. Bodies crash onto the tilted deck as Kira's warning blares through the klaxons. 9 hours 37 minutes and counting. A junior navigator scrambles toward Vance, her uniform torn. Captain, the escape pods, but he's already shaking his head, watching the stars warp outside the viewport. Too late. Wherever we're headed, we're all going together. The dim glow of emergency lighting paints Leora Vex's face in jagged shadows as Vance kicks open the captain's quarters. She doesn't flinch, fingers dancing across a concealed panel in the wall. "Took you longer than I expected," she murmurs, and the smirk curling her lips makes his blood run colder than the void outside. The hidden console flares to life, projecting a holographic star chart, one that doesn't match any official mission parameters. A sleek colony ship glides through the simulation, its course set for a lush world marked in gold. Class 5 habitable, Leora says, tracing the trajectory with a manicured nail. Oxygen-rich, temperate belts untouched. Vance's grip tightens on his sidearm, but she laughs, a sound like shattering glass. Earth's benefactors paid handsomely to trim the unsustainable masses. The final evacuation was always a lottery. For those who didn't buy winning tickets, the hologram shifts, revealing rows of cryopods filled with faces he recognizes: politicians, corporate titans, their families. A child's nameplate glints among them, and Vance's stomach twists. Behind him, the ship shudders violently as another fuel line bursts. Leora tilts her head, amused. "Oh, don't look so betrayed. You really thought they'd waste a paradise on clerks and mechanics." Alarms scream through the corridor as the deck tilts, but her voice cuts through the chaos, icy and precise. "The drones weren't chasing you to stop you, Captain. They were herding you onto the one ship programmed to burn up in the pulsar's wake." A new alert blinks on the display. The navigation override Kira triggered was a feint. Their real destination looms closer, a gravitational maw even the privileged few wouldn't risk. Leora reaches for something under the desk. No witnesses, she sighs, almost regretful. "Not even me." The explosion knocks Vance forward, his shoulder slamming into the buckled corridor wall as fire engulfs engineering behind him. Heat licks at his back through the closing blast doors, the dying crew member's final words still ringing in his ears. Acrid smoke fills his lungs as he stumbles past flickering emergency lights, then freezes at the sound of splintering metal ahead. Rail's voice echoes from a side passage, barking orders to secure the bridge. Vance ducks behind a damaged bulkhead, watching three armed loyalists sprint past, their faces streaked with soot. His fingers find the scorched panel beside him, prying it open to expose the ship's secondary wiring. Sparks spit as he crosses two fractured conduits, a crude sabotage. Somewhere deep in the ship, the artificial gravity stutters again. The loyalists yelp as they're thrown off balance, crashing into each other like dominoes. Vance doesn't wait. He's already moving, boots pounding toward the ventral access shaft where Kira's last transmission originated. The floor trembles beneath him, not from damage this time, but from the jump drive building to critical. A glance through a viewport confirms it. The stars are stretching, the ship caught between trajectories. He vaults over a collapsed support beam, skidding to a stop at the shaft's edge. Below, through swirling smoke, Kira's silhouette fights with a sparking console. Someone's shooting at her from the catwalk above. Without thinking, Vance leaps down the dark void, one hand outstretched toward a dangling power cable. The ship lurches mid-fall, and suddenly he's not just falling, but being pulled sideways by the awakening jump field. Kira's scream mixes with the howl of tearing metal as the entire section of deck plating rips away beneath them both. Static crackles through the ship's speakers like a dying breath, resolving into a voice ragged with terror. This is colony ship Celeste, black hole trajectory a lie. The transmission dissolves into screams, then cuts to silence. Vance's fingers dig into the console as the implications hit him. Leora's fleet isn't just sacrificing them, they're sweeping the cosmos clean of witnesses. Kira's hands fly across her terminal, sweat beading on her forehead as she isolates the signal's origin. "It's close," she whispers, eyes widening at the coordinates. "A few hours at full burn, we could reach them." The bridge erupts into arguments, Rail's loyalists shouting about wasted fuel, the medic pleading for caution, while a junior engineer slams her fist on the panel. Their people, outside the viewport, the void yawns, indifferent. Vance watches the last fragments of the Celeste's transmission flicker on the display, not just coordinates but a timestamp. 3 hours ago, his stomach knots. Whatever's happening over there, it's already begun. The ship shudders as he reroutes power to the thrusters, ignoring the protests. "Plot the intercept," he orders, but Kira's already one step ahead, her screen flashing with danger zones. Leora's patrol routes lit up like spider webs across their path. Somewhere in that darkness, another ship full of discarded lives is fighting to survive, and the clock's ticking. Vance's boots skid across the shuddering deck as the crew's arguments collide around him, half shouting for rescue, half for mutiny. He slams a fist onto the central console, the impact cutting through the chaos. "Look at the numbers." His voice cracks like a whip, gesturing to Kira's screen where two paths flicker, one arcing toward the Celeste's last coordinates, the other spiraling back toward Leora's plotted rendezvous point. "Chasing them burns our last fuel reserve. Taking back control means flying blind into her kill zone." A young mechanic grips the edge of the table, knuckles white. "They're just like us," she whispers. Rail's rifle clatters onto the console, his face unreadable. "Put it to vote." The room falls silent except for the ship's groaning metal. Hands rise slow at first, then in waves until the tally hangs split down the middle. Vance opens his mouth to break the tie when the proximity alarm shrieks, painting the viewport crimson. 3 sleek destroyers emerge from the starscape, their predatory silhouettes blotting out the stars. The bridge lights flicker as the comm system activates on its own, Leora's laughter slithering through the speakers. "Did you really think you had a choice?" Static distorts her voice as the destroyer's weapons lock on. "That's the tragedy of cattle ships, you're only ever cargo." Kira's fingers freeze over the tactical display. The destroyers aren't advancing. They're forming a perimeter, herding the damaged vessel toward a shimmering distortion in space. "It's a jump gate," she breathes. Rail's eye twitches toward the coordinates, then pales. "That's no rescue corridor, that's the pulsar's event horizon." Outside, the stars begin to stretch. The hull groans under violent impacts as metallic shrieks echo through every corridor, boarding pods locking onto airlocks like ticks latching onto flesh. Vance's pulse roars in his ears as he slams the bridge door controls, watching thick alloy plating slide shut just as a plasma torch flares to life on the other side. "Seal the vents too," he barks at a wide-eyed engineer who fumbles with the environmental controls. Kira's fingers fly across her console, pulling up schematics that glow red with damage reports. "They're cutting through Deck 7, she shouts, then flinches as another shudder rocks the ship. Somewhere below, emergency klaxons wail like dying animals. Vance grabs a rifle tossed to him by a bleeding security officer, racking the charge cartridge with a snap. The weapon hums to life, its targeting display flickering just like their odds. Kira's voice cuts through the chaos. Overloading the engines would take out half the ship with them, but a console explodes behind her, sparks raining down as she ducks. "But we'd be floating atoms before they finished looting our corpses." Then the static-filled comm crackles again, Rail's voice dripping with venom. "You should have spaced me when you had the chance." Boots pound in the hallway beyond the barricade. Too many, too fast. Vance exhales, adjusting his grip on the rifle. The flickering lights paint his face in shifting shadows, but his voice stays steady. "Then let's make sure they earn it." Behind them, unnoticed in the panic, the navigation screen blinks, an incoming signal masked by the jamming coordinates. A route. If anyone survives the next 5 minutes, they'll see it. A sliver of hope veering sharply off Leora's plotted course. But first, the boarders are coming. And the bridge doors won't hold forever. The blast doors crumple like paper under the plasma cutters, and the first wave of Leora's mercenaries pours through in a storm of stun rounds and shouted orders. Vance's back hits the wall as armored figures shove the crew into the mess hall, their boots kicking aside ration packs and scattered utensils. Blood trickles from a gash above his eye, painting his vision crimson at the edges, then he freezes. Across the room, Rail slumps between 2 guards, his left arm dangling at a sickening angle, but his spine stays rigid. Their eyes meet, and something unspoken passes between them, not forgiveness, not trust. Just the cold calculus of survival. A guard jerks rail forward for inspection, and that's when it happens. With a roar that shakes the deck plating, Rail drives his elbow into the man's throat, twists free, and slams another mercenary's head into the bulkhead. The pistol he snatches from the falling guard arcs through the air toward Vance. For the crew, Rail snarls, already lunging at the next attacker. The words crack like a gunshot. Chaos detonates. A mechanic swings a chair into a merc's visor, shattering the reinforced glass. Kira dives behind an overturned table, yanking wires from the wall to spark a makeshift barricade. Vance doesn't hesitate. He catches the pistol midair, spins, and fires. The shot takes the nearest guard in the knee, dropping him screaming. Around them, the ship itself seems to join the rebellion. Conduits burst overhead, showering the room in embers as the damaged power grid surges. Then the lights die. Only the emergency strips remain, casting jagged blue shadows as bodies collide in the dark. Someone screams, not in pain but in furious defiance. Vance loses sight of Rail in the maelstrom, but he hears the impact of fists on armor, the wet crunch of a kneecap dislocating. A mercenary tackles him from behind, the pistol skittering away. Vance's fingers close around a broken food tray, instead jagged metal edge gleaming as he drives it upward. The guard chokes, staggers back, and that's when the ceiling panel above them creaks ominously. Too late, the entire section collapses, crushing two mercenaries beneath twisted alloy. Through the new gap, the stars glare down, indifferent, and somewhere beyond that ruined hull, Leora's destroyers wait. But not for long, because now the ship's remaining thrusters rumble to life, their vibrations thrumming through the deck like a predator's growl. Someone's at the controls. Someone who shouldn't be. The ghostly transmission sharpens into a scream, direct hit to hydroponics. We're losing oxygen before dissolving into static once more. Kira's fingers tremble as she isolates the signal, her screen flickering with intercepted comm chatter between Leora's destroyers. They're not just stopping the Celeste, she breathes, her voice hollow. They're carving it apart system by system. Across the bridge, Vance's reflection stares back from the viewport, his face etched against the distant flashes, each one a compartment breached, a life snuffed out. The destroyers move with surgical precision, their weapons carving glowing wounds across the colony ship's hull. Someone reaches behind him. A young ensign clutches at her console, tears cutting through the grime on her face. "Those are families over there," she whispers. The words hang in the air like smoke. Then the comm crackles again, this time with Leora's voice cool, amused, issuing orders to her gunners. "Remember, minimal damage to the cryo bays. Our clients paid for intact specimens." The casual brutality of it snaps something in Vance. He turns from the viewport, his boots ringing against the deck as he crosses to Kira's station in 3 strides. "Can we amplify our signal? Patch me through to every open frequency between here and the Celeste." Kira's eyes widen as she realizes his intent. They'll trace the transmission. Let them. Vance grips the edge of her console, watching another explosion bloom on the viewscreen. "I want every soul on those destroyers to hear what they're doing." Static hisses as Kira reroutes power to the comm array, her fingers flying. A light blinks green. Vance leans into the mic, his voice low and raw. "Celeste, this is Captain Elias Vance of the Evac 717. We see you." For 3 heartbeats, there's only silence. Then, so faint it might be imagination, a child's sob. The destroyer's weapons pause mid-salvo. Even the stars seem to hold their breath. The shuttle control pad hums under Vance's fingers as he punches in the override codes, the system protesting with angry red warnings across the display. Kira's grip on his arm tightens, her nails digging through his sleeve. "They'll shred you before you cross half the distance." Her voice cracks, not with fear but fury. Behind them, the ship groans like a wounded beast, another bulkhead collapsing somewhere deep in its gut. Vance doesn't look up from the console, then aim me straight at their bridge. Rail's shadow falls across them both as he slams a rifle into Vance's chest. The weapon's power cell glows faintly blue, fully charged for all the good it'll do against destroyer-class armor. 5 minutes of life support left in that tin can. Rail growls, jerking his chin toward the battered shuttle. Better make both shots count. The bay doors screech open, revealing the yawning black and the distant, flickering carcass of the Celeste. Leora's destroyers loom like vultures, their weapon ports still glowing from the last volley. Vance's boots clang against the shuttle ramp as he ducks inside, the cramped interior reeking of burnt wiring and desperation. The controls spark to life at his touch, screens flickering with damage, reports half the thrusters offline, no shielding left to speak of. It doesn't matter. His eyes lock onto the tactical display where tiny life signs still pulse aboard the dying colony ship. One in particular, a distress beacon, its signal weakening by the second. A child's emergency bracelet, if he had to guess. Kira slams her palm against the closing hatch. At least plot and evasive. The shuttle jerks free of its clamps before she can finish, engines screaming as it plummets into the void. Alarms blare inside the cockpit, but Vance's hands stay steady on the stick. Out the viewport, the destroyers pivot slow, arrogant. They don't even bother firing yet. Why would they? He's not a threat, just another piece of debris to be swept aside. Then the shuttle's battered calm crackles, not with Leora's taunts, but with a new voice, hoarse, determined. Rail, distraction inbound in 30, don't look back. On the scanner, the EVAC 717 remaining engines flare to life, its broken hull turning ponderously toward the nearest destroyer. A suicide run. Vance's throat tightens, but his fingers don't hesitate. He punches the throttle just as the first torpedoes streak past his wings. The shuttle shudders violently as a destroyer's proximity blast rocks its starboard side, sending warning lights strobing across the cockpit. Vance's hands tighten on the controls, muscles burning as he wrenches the stick sideways, skimming beneath another volley of tracer fire. The Celeste fills the viewport now, a gutted leviathan, its once pristine hull peeled open like rotten fruit, atmosphere still venting in frozen plumes. That whimper crackles through the calm again, weaker this time. Is anyone coming? He doesn't recognize his own voice when he answers, "Hold on, I'm here." Ahead, the colony ship's docking bay gapes like a wound, its mangled doors sparking where emergency protocols failed. Calculating the angle, Vance slams the throttle forward, ignoring the shudder of failing stabilizers. The shuttle's underbelly scrapes against twisted metal as it caroms into the bay, the impact slamming him forward against the harness. Smoke floods the cabin before the hatch even cycles open. Stumbling into the chaos, his boots slip on ice-coated deck plating. The bay's emergency lights cast everything in hellish red bodies float in 0G where artificial gravity failed, tools and debris orbiting them like grotesque satellites. A crushed evacuation pod drifts past, its hatch half melted shut. Then he hears it, a muffled banging from inside. The child's voice filters through the pod's compromised speaker, raw with terror. "Please," Vance's breath fogs the cracked viewport as he presses close. Inside, a girl no older than 8 braces against the walls, her face streaked with soot and tears. Behind her, the pod's oxygen gauge ticks toward empty. His plasma cutter flares to life, its blue glare painting her wide eyes as he carves into the seal. Every instinct screams that Leora's destroyers will turn their guns on the Celeste any second. That this is a trap, a delay, suicide. But the cutter bites deeper, molten metal dripping like blood into the void. The girl's palm slaps against the glass from the other side, matching his rhythm. 3, the seal groans. 2, somewhere in the ship's corpse, a fuel line detonates. 1, with a final heave, the hatch bursts open just as the entire bay jerks violently, throwing them both into the dark. The scanners shriek a warning, but Vance already knows the destroyers have stopped toying with them. The real bombardment has begun. The docking clamps shriek in protest as Vance forces the shuttle's battered airlock against the Celeste's ruined hull. A blast of frigid air hits him the moment the seal engages, not just cold but thin, starved. The cargo bay beyond is a nightmare of flickering emergency strips and makeshift barricades, shadows writhing as survivors press against the walls. A woman lurches forward, her face streaked with coolant burns, and thrusts a swaddled bundle into his arms before he can speak. "Take her first." The words tear from her throat like a prayer. The baby's breath comes in shallow hitches, lips tinged blue from oxygen deprivation. Around them, the bay groans like a dying animal, its compromised bulkheads buckling under some unseen pressure. A teenage boy braces against a collapsing crate, shouting coordinates to a group huddled around a cracked datapad, improvised escape plans scrawled in blood. Vance staggers backward, the weight of the child in his arms suddenly eclipsed by the weight of their eyes. Dozens of them, hundreds, the shuttle can't hold them all. Then light floods the bay, not the sickly glow of failing systems, but the blinding white spear of a destroyer's spotlight punching through the fractured viewport. The woman who handed him the baby freezes, her face bleached bone white by the glare. Somewhere in the void beyond, Leora's gunners are aligning their sights. The spotlight shifts, crawling across the refugees like a predator savoring the hunt. A child wails, the deck trembles. Vance's grip tightens around the baby as he turns toward the shuttle, but the woman grabs his arm, her nails biting through his sleeve. "They'll shoot you down before you clear the bay." Her whisper is raw with grief, not for herself, but for the tiny life in his arms. Outside, the destroyer's engines flare, its silhouette swelling to fill the broken windows. The spotlight holds them pinned, waiting. Then the Celeste's dying intercom rasps to life, and a new voice cuts through the static Kira's, strained but triumphant. Vance move now. Behind the destroyer, a streak of fire erupts from the darkness. The Evac 717 last functional torpedo launcher firing blind, the spotlight wavers. Just for a second, just enough, he runs. The shuttle bucks like a wild animal as another plasma round scorches past the wing, rattling Vance's teeth in his skull. He grips the console, sweat stinging his eyes, and throttles the dying engines harder. The comm line crackles with interference when he opens the channel, but he doesn't raise his voice. "Leora," just her name, flat and final as a judge's gavel. "Call off your dogs, or I paint the entire fleet with your lies." The silence that follows is thicker than the smoke coiling through the cockpit. Then her laughter comes smooth, amused, laced with pity. "You're bluffing, you don't have the range." A targeting alert screams as another destroyer locks onto his heat signature. Kira's voice slices through the static like a scalpel. "Wrong." The data burst hits every open frequency at once, unfurling across screens in a dozen ships' bridges like a virus. Secret manifests, black site coordinates, the child-sized cryopods marked for terraforming sampling. Leora's own voice, crisp and clinical, detailing the cost-cutting measures for non-essential personnel disposal. On the flagship's bridge, someone retches audibly. A console smashes in the background. Leora's breath hitches just once before the line goes dead, but the damage is done. Across the void, destroyers wobble off trajectory, their formation breaking as internal comms erupt. One veers sharply away, then another, their weapons powering down like clenched fists relaxing. The targeting alarm dies mid-screech. In the sudden quiet, the baby in Vance's arms stirs, her tiny fingers curling around his collar. The shuttle's dying thrusters sputter, but for the first time, the darkness ahead feels less like an ending and more like a chance. The destroyer Orion's engines flare violet as it peels away from formation, its turrets rotating with deadly precision, not toward the crippled shuttle, but toward Leora's gleaming flagship. The comms explode with overlapping shouts, half drowned by static, until a single voice cuts through like a blade. This is Captain Drav of the Orion. "We stand with Vance." The words hang in the void, a grenade with the pin pulled. For 3 heartbeats, the fleet holds its breath. Then the Orion's forward cannons fire not plasma, but data. A torrent of encrypted files sprays across every open channel, flooding screens with damning supply manifests, black market purchase orders, even Leora's own voice casually discussing culling quotas over whiskey. Her flagship's viewport flickers as she backs away from the projection, her reflection fracturing across the glass. You don't understand, her voice wavers for the first time, raw with something like panic. The resources were never enough. A secondary monitor lights up beside her, displaying the Celeste's cargo holds. Not packed with colony supplies as promised, but stacked floor to ceiling with gold-pressed luxury pods, each bearing the insignia of Earth's elite. Across the battlefield, destroyers stutter in their trajectories. One by one, their weapon ports dim. A hatch blows open on the frigate Astrea, crewmen spilling onto its hull in pressure suits not to fight, but to spray paint a single word across the armored plating: traitors. The Orion's engines roar as it positions itself between Leora's flagship and the shuttle, its shields flaring defiantly. Then the Astrea opens fire. Not on Vance, not on the refugees, but on the navigation buoy marking the false jump point, the one meant to hurl them all into the pulsar's maw. The explosion blossoms silently against the black, a funeral pyre for Leora's lie. Static swallows her final transmission, but not before a single phrase leaks through. You've doomed them all. The words dissolve into chaos as the fleet's remaining ships power up their drives, not for retreat but for rally. Coordinates flash across every screen, not Earth's, not Leora's, a third option, a real one, and somewhere in the dark, the Celeste survivors press their hands to the glass, watching the stars realign. The flagship's weapons hum to life with a bone-deep vibration that rattles the shuttle's hull, their barrels glowing crimson as they lock onto the Celeste's exposed reactor core. Vance's fingers dig into the armrests not from fear, but from the crushing weight of math. No torpedoes left, no shields, just the fragile lives stacked in the cabin behind him and a front row seat to genocide. Then Kira's voice shreds through the despair like a plasma torch. The jump drive, her words come in a breathless rush over the comm, half drowned by screaming alerts. It's still hot from the aborted launch. We can use the black hole's gravity too. A proximity alarm drowns her out as Leora's flagship fires, not at the Celeste. Not at them. A single precision shot severs the EVAC 717 last tether to the dying mothership, the explosion flinging them toward the void. The stars smear sideways through the viewport as artificial gravity fails, the baby in Vance's arms floating free until he snags her ankle. Kira's schematics flash across the crack, display a trajectory line arcing perilously close to the black hole's event horizon, then slingshotting outward like a stone from a sling. We'd need to hit the exact angle, she pants, her voice fraying at the edges. 1 degree off and we spiral in forever. Outside, the destroyers hesitate, their formation fracturing as more crews mutiny. Leora's face flickers on the view screen, her composure cracking as she snarls at someone off camera. Fire at will, but the order comes too late. The Celeste's battered navigation array suddenly flares to life, its dying systems projecting a single set of coordinates, not into the abyss but toward a distant yellow star. A real colony world, the actual destination Leora's patron stole. Vance doesn't hesitate. He slams the shuttle's thrusters to full burn, aiming straight for the black hole's swirling edge. Behind them, the Celeste's reactor goes critical in a silent, blossoming fireball. Not an explosion, but a signal flare bright enough to be seen across the sector. Leora's scream echoes across the comms as her own ships turn their guns inward. The last thing Vance sees before the gravity well grabs them is the Orion ramming her flagship, both vessels vanishing in a burst of light. Then the stars twist into ribbons and the shuttle plummets into the bend of space itself. The shuttle screams through the void like a dying comet, its hull plates groaning under the black hole's relentless pull. Vance's fingers cramp around the controls, every muscle taut as he fights the gravitational tide threatening to twist them into oblivion. Behind him, a child whimpers, not in fear, but in protest as a medic presses an oxygen mask to her face. The Celeste survivors huddle together, their reflections flickering in the cracked viewport where Leora's flagship still looms, its weapon ports pulsing with charged energy. Then the impossible happens. The starship's engines roar to life, not in pursuit, but in a violent swerve, its thrusters firing at full burn directly into the path of Leora's remaining destroyers. Kira's voice crackles through the calm, raw with static and something worse, resolve. "We're overloading the core," she shouts over the blaring alarms. "When we blow, ride the shockwave out of the gravity well." The starship's hull glows white-hot as its systems spiral into critical, its trajectory carving a suicide run straight through the enemy formation. Leora's scream of fury drowns in the sudden silence of severed comms. The shuttle's sensors shriek as the starship's mass displaces the black hole's pull just enough, a sliver of physics and madness opening an escape route. Vance doesn't hesitate. He wrenches the shuttle sideways, skimming along the edge of the event horizon as the starship behind them detonates in a burst of light so intense it bleaches the viewport. The shockwave hits like a hammer, catapulting them forward as space itself warps around the dying vessel's sacrifice. For one breathless moment, the stars stretch into streaks, then snap back into place as the shuttle lurches free. The black hole's hunger fades behind them, replaced by the quiet hum of stabilizers finally finding equilibrium. No one cheers. The baby in the medic's arms stares wide-eyed at the viewport, where the remnants of Leora's fleet scatter like embers from a snuffed fire. Then the nav console beeps once, soft as a heartbeat, plotting a new course through the suddenly empty dark, not toward ruin, not toward lies, but home. The starship's jump drive ignites with a sound like reality tearing apart, a deafening silence that vibrates through the shuttle's hull as spacetime itself buckles under the strain. Vance's vision blurs at the edges, the viewport stretching Leora's flagship into a grotesque smear of light as it's caught in the gravitational wake. Her final transmission reaches them a heartbeat too late, her voice warped by the abyss. "You don't know what you've, then nothing." The ship crumples like parchment in a fist, its hull folding inward as the black hole claims its due. The shuttle lurches, thrown clear by the violent release of collapsing forces. Emergency systems scream warnings, their alerts flashing crimson across every console. The baby in the medic's arms wails as artificial gravity flickers, sending them all floating for one weightless second before the stabilizers claw back control. Outside, the stars reel drunkenly across the viewport, not the orderly pinpricks of deep space, but streaks of light like claw marks across the dark. Kira's voice crackles through the calm, strained but triumphant. Orions on intercept their launching tethers. A new shape resolves in the chaos, the battered destroyer, its hull scorched from battle, maneuvering closer with agonizing precision. Magnetic lines shoot across the void, latching onto the shuttle's broken hull with metallic shrieks. Then impact. The shuttle jerks violently as the Orion reels them in, its boarding armature extending like a lifeline. Vance's fingers ache where they've locked around the pilot's chair, his knuckles white. Through the viewport, the Orion's airlock yawns open, revealing a crowd of faces, some bleeding, some soot-streaked, all staring at the shuttle with something between hope and disbelief. A familiar figure shoves to the front, his left arm dangling uselessly at his side. Rail's grin is all teeth. "Took you long enough." Behind them, the black hole's maw swirls, silent and indifferent. But ahead, the Orion's corridors hum with life, with voices raised not in panic but in purpose. The navigational array flashes a steady rhythm, plotting a course through the wreckage of Leora's lies. Not toward escape, toward something fiercer, toward justice. White light stabs Vance's vision as consciousness returns in uneven pulses. First the antiseptic burn in his nostrils, then the dull ache radiating from every joint. Cheers erupt somewhere beyond the medbay's curtain, the sound muffled as if underwater. A calloused hand grips his shoulder, steadying him as he tries to sit up. Captain Drab's face swims into focus, her dark eyes shadowed by fatigue but alight with something fiercer than victory. "Leora's gone," she says, the words clipped. Swallowed whole when the event horizon collapsed, her thumb brushes the fresh scar along his collarbone, a gesture that isn't gentle. Turns out black holes don't discriminate between traitors and heroes. The curtain yanks aside, revealing Kira leaning against the doorway, her arm in a sling and her grin sharp enough to cut glass. And we've got new coordinates. She tosses a data chip onto the cot, where it lands with a quiet click. The hologram that erupts isn't Leora's doctored star charts or the pulsar's deadly path, but a lush planet rotating lazily in amber sunlight. Class 8 habitable, 2 moons, equatorial freshwater basins, and she taps the display, zooming in on a cluster of geometric shapes near a river delta. What looks like prefab shelters. From the first wave of evacs maybe, buried in the archives until someone scrubbed them, Drav's grip tightens. The fleet's yours if you want it. The offer hangs between them, weighted with the unspoken. The people need a symbol. Not a smuggler, not a mutineer, a leader. Outside, the Orion's corridors hum with voices, not the desperate shouts of battle, but the purposeful murmur of crews realigning thrusters, rerouting power, rebuilding. Someone laughs. The sound is foreign and fragile. Vance's fingers close around the data chip, the edges biting into his palm. On the display, the colony world spins on, indifferent to their scars. "Call a vote," he says at last. "Every ship, every survivor." Drav exhales through her nose, not quite approval, not quite protest, but Kira's grin widens. Behind her, through the open door, a child darts past, clutching a ration bar like treasure. The sight lodges in Vance's throat. The intercom crackles to life with a burst of static, then Rail's voice, rough but clear. Weapons diagnostics complete. "Found something you'll want to see." There's a pause. "Brought beer." Kira snorts. Drav mutters something about insubordination. Vance swings his legs over the cot's edge, ignoring the medbay's protest, and reaches for his boots. The data chip's projection flickers, casting emerald light across the floor where his shadow should be. The observation deck's filtered starlight casts long shadows across Vance's hands as he traces the black hole's last distortions on the reinforced glass. The cosmic wound is healing, swirling darkness, shrinking into a pinprick against the velvet void. Footsteps echo behind him, deliberate and uneven. Rail's reflection appears in the viewport, his left sleeve pinned where the medics couldn't save the arm. "We lost good people," he mutters, pressing a flask into the scarred rail between them. The metal still bears carbon scoring from the battle. Vance doesn't reach for the drink. His gaze lingers on the celestial grave where Leora's fleet vanished, then drops to the deck below where a dozen children from the Celeste chase each other through hydroponic gardens now repurposed as a playground. A toddler shrieks with laughter as she's caught mid-run, lifted high by a mechanic still wearing his soot-stained jumpsuit. But not everyone, Vance says. Rail follows his stare, his jaw working silently before he takes a swig. The liquor smells like engine cleaner and regret. "You really think they'll let us keep them?" His voice drops, rough as asteroid grit. "Earth Central'll claim custody the second we dock." Beyond the viewport, the black hole winks out, an ending written in bent light and silence. But inside, the ship thrums with new rhythms, the patter of small feet where boots once marched, the murmur of bedtime stories under flickering glow panels. A girl no older than 6 presses her palm against the observation glass beside Vance, her reflection overlapping the stars. She doesn't flinch from the dark. Rail exhales hard through his nose, watching the mechanic spin the giggling toddler until her braids fly wide. The flask clinks as he sets it down, leaving fingerprints on polished steel. "We don't dock," he says suddenly, as if the words have been waiting in his marrow. Somewhere in the ship's depths, the navigation array beeps, a new course plotted in quiet rebellion. The children's laughter rises like a signal flare, bright against the endless night. The jump corridor collapses behind them with a sound like shattering glass, the last remnants of Leora's empire swallowed by the void. Vance's knuckles whiten around the command rail as the fleet punches through into calm starlight. No alarms, no gunfire, just the steady hum of engines at cruise. The colony world hangs ahead like a promise, its atmosphere swirling in bands of blue and gold beneath two crescent moons. Kira's boots click against the deck as she approaches, a datapad glowing in her hands. First scans look good. Her voice is light, almost careless, but her fingers tremble slightly where they grip the screen. Atmosphere stable, polar ice caps within expected parameters, and she taps the display, zooming in on a continent's edge. Look at that river delta. Soil composite matches Earth's breadbasket regions. Vance doesn't take the pad. His eyes stay fixed on the viewport where no orbital defenses glint, no luxury shuttles clutter the landing zones. Just wind-scoured plateaus and forests swaying under an alien sun. No elites, he murmurs. Kira's smirk is all edges, no lies. She leans against the console, her shoulder brushing his. Just us cockroaches surviving again. Behind them, the fleet's comm channels crackle to life, not with orders, but with voices overlapping in a dozen languages. A mechanic from the Celeste whoops as her scanner picks up geothermal vents. A former security officer turned farmer debates crop rotations with an Orion engineer. Someone starts singing off-key, the melody rising through the open intercom like a weed through cracked pavement. Rail limps into the bridge, his good arm balancing a tray of ration bar celebratory cake stacked perilously high. They're calling it second chance in the mess hall, he grunts, shoving the tray at Kira. I voted for Kick Leora's ghost. The datapad chirps again, deeper scans now, revealing cavern systems and mineral deposits. Vance finally takes it, his thumb hovering over the topographical maps. Somewhere below decks, a child's laughter echoes through the air vents, bouncing off steel walls that no longer smell of blood and fear. Outside, the planet's Terminator line slides toward dawn, gilding the clouds in fire. No cages this time, no quotas, just the hum of engines slowing at last, and the stars watching, silent and patient, as the Forgotten press their hands to the glass. Dust swirls across the makeshift training yard as Rail adjusts a refugee's grip on the stun baton, his calloused hands guiding trembling fingers into position. The teenager jerks away, eyes flashing. Why bother teaching us, she snaps, knuckles white around the weapon. We're just dead weight slowing you down. Around them, 24 survivors mimic the drill with salvaged pipes and kitchen knives, shadows stretching long in the fading light of the colony's twin moons. Rail's ruined arm twitches in its sling, a phantom pang where the limb used to be. He studies the girl's sunburnt face, the defiant set of her jaw so like his niece's before the first evac ships left Earth. A gust of wind carries the scent of alien sage from the nearby foothills, mingling with the sweat and rust of their patchwork armor. You're right, he says finally, voice rough as asteroid gravel. Central Command wrote us all off years ago. He taps the faded insignia on his chest, the one he hasn't bothered to remove. Difference is, now we know it. The stun baton hums to life in the girl's hands, its blue glow reflecting in her widening eyes. Behind her, an older woman practices disarming moves with a fire axe, her motions sharp with the desperation of someone who's already lost everything once. Rail's mouth quirks, not quite a smile. Vance's flaw was thinking truth makes you weak. He nods toward the horizon where the fleet's salvaged ships gleam like broken teeth. But out here, knowing you're expendable, the wind shifts carrying the distant chime of the settlement's warning bell. That just makes you dangerous. A child's laughter rings out from the mess tent, startlingly bright against the gathering dusk. The teenager's grip tightens on the baton, but something in her posture shifts, less brittle now, more like a blade being tempered. Rail turns away, hiding the twitch of his scarred lips. Let Central Command send their enforcers. Let them try to recolonize the discarded. The drills continue long after sunset, silhouettes moving in perfect unison beneath unfamiliar stars. The fleet hangs in silent orbit, their battered hulls catching the first golden rays as the planet turns toward dawn. Vance stands at the observation deck's cracked viewport, watching light spill across continents no human eyes have ever seen. River valleys glinting like veins of mercury, mountain ranges casting jagged shadows that shrink by the second. Behind him, the hangar echoes with the restless murmur of hundreds pressed shoulder to shoulder, their breath fogging the glass. A child perches on someone's shoulders, small fingers splayed against the transparent steel as if she could touch the swirling storms below. You ever wonder what the first settlers on Earth felt? Kira's voice is low beside him, her arms crossed against the chill seeping through the poorly insulated bulkhead. Standing on some shoreline, staring at trees no one had ever named, Vance doesn't answer at first. His reflection in the glass overlaps the planet's surface, a ghost superimposed on untamed wilderness. When he turns to face the crowd, the weight of their silence settles like a physical thing. No fancy speeches today, no grand promises, just the rasp of his palm against the control panel as he opens the fleet-wide comm. This time, he says, watching the dawn paint their faces in wildfire hues, "We build something that lasts." The words hang in the air, simple and unadorned. A cook from the Orion wipes her hands on her apron, leaving flour streaks. A mechanic cradles a salvaged thruster coil like an offering. No cheers erupt. Just nods sharp, understanding. They've all seen how fragile civilizations can be. Kira's elbow nudges his ribs as the first full beam of sunlight crests the horizon, igniting the planet's oceans into liquid gold. "Think we'll screw it up again." Her smirk is all edges, but her knuckles whiten where they grip the railing. Vance's laugh surprises even him, rough with sleepless nights and the metallic aftertaste of too much ration coffee. Probably. Outside, the clouds part over a vast grassland rippling like a living thing. Somewhere down there, rivers carve canyons without witnesses and winds howl through empty passes. He exhales, watching the child at the viewport press her nose to the glass. But not today. The landing protocols blink to life across every screen, their steady beeps slicing through the quiet. Somewhere in the crowd, a baby fusses, then stills as its mother hums a lullaby from a world they'll never see again. The stars fade overhead, outshone by a sun that doesn't care about human failures or fresh starts. Down on the surface, shadows retreat inch by inch, revealing a shore where no footprints yet mark the sand. The hologram flickers to life in the center of the classroom, its blue-tinged light scattering across wide-eyed faces. Vance's recorded form stands slightly translucent, his boots planted in midair where the projector hums. Behind him, static whispers the ghost of a starship's bridge controls long dismantled, voices long silenced. The final starship left to bury the past, his image says, and the words land differently now than they would have decades ago, when the colony's first foundations were still raw metal under an alien sky. A girl in the front row leans forward, her braids slipping over her shoulder as she traces the scar running down Vance's holographic cheek with her fingertip. It doesn't bleed, it never did. History never does once it's sealed in light and memory. Outside, the wind carries the scent of turned soil and ripe grain through the open windows. The terraforming engines fell silent years ago, their work done, but the fields remember stretching gold and green to the horizon where the old evacuation ships rust gracefully into monuments. The children don't flinch at the hologram's mention of starvation quotas or reactor meltdowns. Those words are just stories to them, like Earth's ancient wars or the first moon landing. Their world was built on darker myths. You carry the future. Vance's recording finishes, and then he's gone, leaving the classroom buzzing with questions the curriculum won't answer. Who decided which ships got full oxygen tanks? Why did the elite's cryopods have velvet lining? The teacher doesn't shush them. She knows better. Let them pry the past apart with curious hands. A boy by the door is first to bolt when the dismissal chime rings, his shoes kicking up dust as he sprints into the sunlight. The others follow, their laughter bouncing off the solar panels lining the school's roof. They race past the memorial garden where names are etched into reclaimed hull plating, past the elders who pause their repairs to watch the next generation blur by. The children don't stop until they reach the observation ridge, where the whole valley spreads beneath them. Not a ruin, not a refuge, but a home. In the distance, the last functional starship skeleton catches the sunset, its alloy bones gilded by the light of a sun that doesn't care about human endings or beginnings. The kids catch their breath, squinting at the horizon. Somewhere beyond it, the black hole that swallowed Leora's lies still spins. Somewhere behind them, the archives keep their secrets. But here, now, the wheat bends under a breeze that smells like possibility, and the only countdown that matters is the one to dinner. The static hisses like a dying breath before resolving into a voice no one aboard ever expected to hear again. This is Leora Vex. The words slither through the speakers, brittle with distortion, a ghost rattling the bones of the ship. Kira's hand freezes over the comm panel, her knuckles now roughened by decades of repair work, whitening around the edge of the console. The transmission stutters, eaten by interference. Trajectory unknown, a pause, thick with something that might be fear or mockery, impossible to tell. Then, softer, almost human. Please, the signal dissolves into noise, leaving the bridge colder than the void outside. No one moves, no one breathes. In the corner, a younger mechanic drops his hydrospanner. The clang echoes like a gunshot. Kira exhales through her teeth and kills the feed with a tap that feels too loud. Some ghosts, she mutters, staring at the blackened screen where Leora's voice had slithered free. Don't stay buried. Someone in the back coughs. The sound is swallowed by the ship's usual hum, the creak of aging bulkheads, the whisper of recycled air. No one mentions the way Kira's fingers linger near the panel, as if expecting the static to reform into words. No one points out that Leora's coordinates, fractured as they were, didn't match any known system. That's the thing about the dark between stars. It doesn't give up its dead easily. Outside the viewport, the black yawns wide, indifferent. Somewhere in its depths, a ship that shouldn't exist might still be drifting. Or waiting, the mechanic retrieves his hydrospanner, careful not to meet anyone's eyes. Some questions don't have answers. Some transmissions should have stayed lost. And yet, Kira rubs her thumb along the edge of the console, where decades of similar gestures have worn the metal smooth. A habit, a tell. The crew knows better than to ask. But when the next shift change comes, she doesn't leave her post, just watches the stars slide past, her reflection fractured in the glass, a woman staring down the long road between what's buried and what claws its way back. The twin moons cast silver pathways across the valley below, their light catching on irrigation channels and the sloping roofs of the new settlement. From this height, the colony pulses with life-glowing windows dotting the hillside, fields of genetically tailored wheat swaying in the night breeze, the hum of generators blending with the chirps of native insects adapting to their altered ecosystem. The camera lingers on a group of children clustered around an old view screen, their faces bathed in the blue glow of a star chart as they trace routes to worlds no one from Earth will ever claim. Then the view pulls back, rising steadily past the ridge where the first salvage teams planted their flags, past the skeletal remains of the EVAC 717, repurposed into a communications tower, its rusted hull now entwined with creeping vines. Higher still, until the curve of the planet reveals itself, the jagged coastline, the sprawling forests, the faint scars of landing sites already softening under layers of new growth. Against this backdrop, the real marvel glides into view, Not a derelict or a warship, but a sleek vessel of polished alloy and curved glass, its engines pulsing faintly as it skirts the atmosphere. Then another and another. These aren't desperate escape pods or hollow promises from a dying Earth. There's something fiercer, something built. Vance's reflection flickers across the observation deck's glass, his face older now, the scars faded but still visible. Behind him, the colony's first elected council murmurs over schematics, debating how many schools the next wave of settlers will need. He doesn't turn to join them. His gaze stays fixed on the horizon where the ships shrink to pinpricks of light. Somewhere in the dark, Leora's ghost might still whisper. Somewhere in the void, old debts might linger. But here, under unfamiliar constellations, the air smells like turned soil and charging capacitors, like a future wrested from the jaws of extinction. The last starship left tonight. Tomorrow they begin.